Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Results Grassroots Conference Call for June. For anyone who's on their first monthly Grassroots Conference Call, a big welcome. My name's Aaron Oxley. I'm the Executive Director of Results UK, and I hope you're going to enjoy the discussion this month. We're going to be hearing about the context for a campaign action this month, which is to write to the Foreign Secretary about the government's new international development strategy. A little later, I'll be introducing our special guest speaker who's going to show us how it is relevant to what we do here at Results. But before we get started, I'll go through the usual housekeeping messages. We're recording this call and we're going to post the recording on our website for anyone who can't make it this evening so that they can watch it later. So please do feel free to turn off your video if you'd rather not be in the recording. When we post that recording, we'll also include any links or resources that have been shared in the chat box during the call, so you don't need to frantically copy and paste. We're also using automatic captions, which you can turn on or off using the Zoom menu bar at the bottom of the screen. Do remember, please keep yourself muted during the call. And if you've got any questions or comments, go ahead and use that chat box and we'll try to respond to you there. If you're new, please feel free to introduce yourself either by turning on your microphone and saying hello now, or if you're a bit shy, you can use the chat box. We'd love to hear where you're calling from, but it's also completely okay not to introduce yourself if you'd prefer. If anybody new that wants to say hello. Okay, veterans tonight. Very good. As always, I'm going to start off tonight's call with a few updates on what's happening in the world of international development and how it affects our work here at Results. First of all, some of you have been sharing with us how you're getting on with the priority campaign that we've had over the last couple of months, which is to get your MP's support for the 7th replenishment of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. What we're hearing is that some of you are struggling to get your MP's attention. And with all the political challenges we have at the moment, such as the cost of living crisis, the challenge to Boris Johnson's leadership, it absolutely has been hard to get MP's attention. Not unrelated to the above, many MPs are reporting very high constituency caseloads. And I share this to let you know that if you're struggling to get your MP's attention, that's absolutely normal right now, so stick with it. Those of you who are on the conference call last month had an opportunity to share your experience of how it's going, and I hope that was a useful discussion. However, always remember that MPs are your elected representatives, and so please do persevere. We know that in many cases, writing to them is a more realistic option than an in-person or even a Zoom meeting, and that's fine too, of course. The important thing is to get them to agree to write to the government in support of the Global Fund. That political pressure is ultimately what will have an impact on the size of the pledge that gets made. We've got a big mountain to climb with our very challenging target of £1.8 billion over 3 years, which will help save 20 million lives if we can reach the $18 billion global target. But even if we don't reach that full amount, every additional £100 million we can convince the UK government to give now will really matter. That'll go right into saving lives from some of the world's most awful diseases in some of the most cost-effective and effective ways. Now, I use this phrase a lot, but these aren't just numbers. These are real people who will not get sick in the first place, or who got sick but will get well with access to good treatments. I hope you all feel really motivated by this, that as ordinary citizens, we can have an influence on how such huge sums of money are spent. And you're really making a difference with every letter, every phone call, and every meeting that you have. If you haven't yet contacted your MP, it's probably not too late, because even though we expect that the government would make a decision in private quite soon, events of the last week show us that they're quite busy and things are certainly in flux. Now, I don't want to talk too much about the new international development strategy before our speaker addresses us on this topic, but one of the big concerns that we have at Results is the commitment that the strategy makes to reducing the proportion spent on multilateral organizations. Those are global collaborations, such as the Global Fund that we've been talking about, and instead to spend more money on bilateral, that is, direct country-to-country support. The argument is that we have more control of where the money goes and therefore more impact, but this just doesn't follow at all. Organizations such as the Global Fund, or Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which we also work on, they work at a global scale, which the UK working alone cannot match, in terms of buying and distributing PPE or medical technologies at scale and therefore at reduced cost. These organizations are also working to globally coordinated strategies that the UK actually helps to write, as we quite literally have a seat at the board tables of these organizations. And this happens in collaboration with the countries themselves, all of the above being things that massively increase effectiveness. So one problem of reducing the funding envelope for these institutions is that the UK potentially has dramatically less impact on poverty reduction, on saving lives, and on reducing the prevalence of things like infectious diseases. It also doesn't follow that the UK's own independently run international development programs will be more effective. As some of you will know, we and other organisations in the sector keep a close eye on what the UK's official development assistance, or ODA, budget is actually spent on. And not all of their programs rate highly for their transparency or their impact on poverty reduction. Some of you will be familiar with a body called ICAI. That's ICAI, ICAI, the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. This body is responsible for holding the government publicly accountable for its ODA spending and is answerable to Parliament. ICAI recently published a report on the UK's support to another multilateral body, the World Bank. The UK was the world's largest contributor to the World Bank's development programs until it massively cut its contribution in 2021. Now, I agree that the UK shouldn't be the world's biggest donor to the World Bank, and we should have cut our contribution, but we cut it very, very dramatically. The report from ICAI showed that the UK's spending on development via the World Bank was in fact very effective, as well as giving the UK an outsized influence on overall World Bank priorities and programs. There is now a big risk. Now, it's not inevitable, but still a very meaningful risk that this influence is going to be reduced. We'll put a link to this in the chat box for anyone who wants to dive a bit deeper into the specific example of multilateralism at risk. We'll also share an article from the Centre for Global Development. It's a research body that suggests that even under current projections, the UK could maintain its existing levels of spending on its multilateral commitments. Bear in mind, though, we're asking for a 30% uplift in UK contributions to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria because of unprecedented need caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a big ask. Lastly, I want to briefly mention the UK's overall ODA budget. As most of you know, in many areas that we care about, nutrition, vaccinations, education, the UK made very significant cuts in 2020 and 2021. These are resources that are very much missed by the programs and countries trying to deal with the needs of affected populations, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. The UK has been the only major donor cutting its ODA programs at a time when others saw the need to scale up support. However, we did get an important commitment from the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, last year that we would return to 0.7% of our gross national income, or GNI, when his fiscal tests were met. At the time, we were sceptical that these targets could easily be met or whether the commitment to do so was real, but it has since been repeated by ministers, most recently yesterday at a House of Lords debate. Although the cost of living crisis could well make a return to 0.7 a bit further off, it's still being predicted that we could return to that level of ODA spending by 2024-2025. It's a fiscal year that starts in April, which would mean that the UK suddenly has to develop new programs that are of high quality and good value for money. As that date gets closer, this will be harder and harder to achieve, especially if the planned cuts to the civil service go ahead. This is another good reason why high-quality, effective multilateral agencies such as the Global Fund are very much in the UK's interest to continue to work with at scale. Again, the Centre for Global Development has written an excellent piece on this topic, which we're going to put into the chat box. Now, before we hear from this month's guest speaker, it's time to hear about the advocacy you have all been doing around the UK over the last month. So I'm going to hand over to Ruthie for the usual Grassroots update.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I just unplugged my headphones and worried it ruined the speaking. Thanks for that update. And thank you everyone for joining us. So as summer's coming around, we're all quite busy and there's been lots of activity around the network. So as Aaron said, it's not an easy time to be engaging with MPs, but you are still all doing it, which is great to hear. We've seen a few letters being sent to MPs, and some of you are trying to get meetings, some of you have had meetings, and yeah, I think together we're just still pushing for an investment in the Global Fund. On the 18th of May, which feels like quite a long time ago, but really wasn't, we had an action day in Parliament, which was in collaboration with the One Campaign, Restless Development, and other organisations who also have networks of campaigners who care about access to health, and specifically are calling for investment in the Global Fund. So a few results campaigners joined from Brighton and London, and we together, I think, with all the campaigners together, spoke to over 20 MPs. So it was a really great event, and really good opportunity to chat to MPs across parties, and some peers, about the Global Fund and other health issues. So I think Iman is on the call and was going to let us know how she found the day.
Hi, Ruthie. So it was my first lobby day. We went together, the team from Brighton. I didn't really know what to expect until I got there, but I think it was a nice surprise to see other campaigners from different organisations, like you said, like One Stop Aid and Malaria No More, etc. I think my favourite part about the day was actually getting to meet all the other campaigners, just because it reaffirmed that we're not the only ones lobbying for the Global Fund. So knowing that, and knowing that other people are lobbying together, just it kind of clarified that actually hopefully something will get done about increasing the Global Fund. Our team spoke to Caroline Lucas, as she's the MP for Brighton Pavilion. So it was quite nice being able to speak to her, as she's from our local constituency. We did speak to a few other people, but I can't actually remember who they were. But yeah, it was a really good experience. Never had anything like it before, but I'm looking forward to more lobby days hopefully as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's always such good energy when you're around, I think, 40 to 50 campaigners all there, like joined for the same reason. And it was very exciting when Caroline Lucas came in. There's a photo, I think I've put a link to one on Twitter, but yeah, there's a few tweets and she retweeted us, which was very exciting as well. So yeah, thank you for coming, everyone who came. And also a big thank you to the Pool Group, who spent one of their weekends in May running a fundraising event, and they raised over £800 for results. And it was a lovely day. Tanya, who managed to go down, said that she personally found it incredibly inspiring and motivating to see how much hard work and effort you all put into setting up and running the plant sale, bookstore, bric-a-brac stall, and drinks and cake stall. So I think, have we got someone from Pool on the call to give us a quick update on how?
Yes, I'm here. It's Helen here.
Hi, Helen. I did put the photos together if you'd like me to share them as well.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there we go. There's no people there though. Oh, these must be the pictures that Tanya's look.
Oh yes, we can get the people photos, not just the table ones. Tables looked very nice though. There we go. That's a nice.
We all are, yes.
Hello, me.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's all of us. I think. Well, everybody that was able to come. Yeah. Yeah. There we are. I can list you their names, but you don't need that really, do you? No.
So it was a team effort to run the event.
Yes, it really was. We one or two of those people aren't regular members of the group, but you can see they're wearing blue instead of red shirts. But they came along to help, which was lovely.
Amazing. Well done, as I said to you all, and I hope you had a nice day as well. Tanya definitely enjoyed
Okay.
it. Was impressed with the baking skills.
Publicity out.
Yeah, we had leaflets about results on all the tables so that people could pick those up and take them home with them. We didn't do a talk or anything. We just left information lying around for people. And I think it's a very good way of us all working together and as a group, sort of renewing friendships and things, because we hadn't seen much of each other in the last couple of years, really.
That's great. And yeah, money that's fundraised will go into the unrestricted pot, which means that Results can spend it on things that are really important, that might not necessarily get funded otherwise. So yeah, big thank you. And I wish I'd been there to try some of the cake.
Well,
so on a different note, we've revived our Instagram account. So we're sharing updates there as well as on Twitter and Facebook. So we'll put the link in the chat, and if you are on Instagram, you can give us, and also other results groups like Brighton and Manchester, for example, I know have quite active accounts at the moment. So you can give us a follow and a like, all of the above. And the last update from me is about the national conference, which if you haven't already, you can still reserve your free ticket. It's in a month's time, so the first weekend of July, 2nd and 3rd of July. And it's a hybrid event, so you can join in person in our venue at Friend's House in London or online. And the first session is a joint call with Results Australia at 9 a.m, which will be before the main conference event to accommodate for the time difference. And that will be an opportunity to hear from and chat to Grassroots members in Results Australia and plan some areas of collaboration. So yeah, we hope you'll join for that. If you're joining us in person, you can come to the venue earlier or join online. So that's going to kick off the conference, sort of. And then when we kick off officially with our theme of the power in all our voices, there'll be a welcome session followed by our keynote speaker, Irungu Horton, who's Executive Director of Amnesty Kenya. And over the weekend, we've got workshops on storytelling, a panel discussion with climate justice activists whose voices were excluded from COP26. We've got a session on the Global Fund with a Global Fund advocate, Handa, and many more sessions. So we'll put some links in the chat so you can check the agenda. But yeah, I really recommend coming along if you can, and you can see the various ticket options to come in person or online, and for one or both days. And then following the conference on Monday, the 4th of July, we have an in-person advocacy day, which is our first one in a couple of years. And this is a chance to meet parliamentarians and civil servants to discuss a range of interesting and important topics, including education and nutrition. So if you're interested in attending, please also reserve a ticket that's separate to the conference, just so that we can make sure everyone's in the right place at the right time, not wandering around Westminster looking for us. And at the conference, we'll be holding an election for the Grassroots Trustee to join the board. So on the board of trustees, there's an elected representative from the Grassroots Network, so someone like you on the call. And being a trustee is a great way to have a steer on what Results works on and how, and gain experience and skills, and work with a group of people who share a commitment to the values and vision of the organisation. So we'll put a link in the chat with more information about what the role is and also how to nominate yourself, which sounds scary. It's really not. It's just a short paragraph about why you're interested in the role and what you can bring to it. And the deadline for that's the 29th of June. So please do have a think about whether you're interested in doing that, and be in touch if you have any questions. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you at the conference, and we hope to have a few nominations for the board role in the meantime. And on that note, I will hand back to Aaron.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Ruthie. Do you think about the trustee role? We've just recently refreshed the induction pack, so it's a very nice on-ramp onto a new role with Results if you're interested in doing that. So it's time for me to introduce the topic of this evening's conversation, which is to hear more about the government's new international development strategy and what it's going to mean for the future of the UK's role in helping support the development aspirations of lower and middle income countries and of people facing poverty and injustice around the world. So I'm really delighted to welcome our guest speaker tonight. His name is Kit Dorey. Kit is the UK's Policy and Advocacy Manager at the NGO Peace Direct. His LinkedIn profile states that he has specific interests in the Sustainable Development Goals, social inclusion and international development. And he's previously worked for BOND, which is the big umbrella organization for all of us international development NGOs. He's actually also recently written a very thoughtful analysis of the international development strategy that we're going to put a link to in the chat box. Really recommend you read that. It's brilliant. Kit, really warm welcome to you tonight. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the warm welcome. And that does remind me I need to update my LinkedIn profile because I haven't done that in a while.
well, quite all right. Kit, let me just start by explaining who we've got on this call. I mean, you've been here since the start, so you know a few of the people and what they've been up to. But you're joining our grassroots volunteer campaigners from all around the UK, from Scotland to the South Coast, who regularly take advocacy actions, mostly aimed at the UK government to try and persuade them to prioritise international development programmes that tackle poverty and injustice, particularly around access to health and education. Some of the people on the call have been working on these issues for many years, but we've also got some people on the call tonight that are relatively new to international development. Now, as we've mentioned, we're going to be asking 3 pre-prepared questions for you, but before we ask them, I'm going to ask your personal question. If you could share a little bit more about your background, your current role, and most importantly, what is it that motivated you to get involved with international development issues?
Thanks for that. So I guess, as you mentioned already, I work at Peace Director as advocacy manager. And in my current role, I'm focused mostly on trying to influence parliamentarians, influence UK government, and build networks with other NGOs and others of us who are trying to work together on similar issues. Peace Direct focuses on local peace building, which is essentially direct support to people at the community level who are trying to build peace in their different countries and prevent conflict. And we have partnerships in 14 different countries, in 14 different fragile countries. So it includes DRC, Myanmar, Nigeria, lots of countries in different parts of the world. And we've had quite a big focus since the organisation was started on locally led development. So that's a big priority for us, particularly localising the way international development is done. And in the last couple of years, that's come out as a more of a research focus on decolonising the system. And when we talk about decolonising, what we're talking about is trying to review, rethink, and transform the way that we think about development and the way that we deliver development as a sector. So that really speaks to why I was motivated to what I'm motivated mostly in doing when I'm working in the development sector. I think there are some serious issues with the way international development is done, but at the same time, it's really amazing, which can be quite demotivating if you're entering the sector to make change and to do positive things in the world. But at the same time, it's really great to see organizations that are doing good things, trying to review how they work and to, rethink how they use language and how they do campaigning and that kind of thing. So that really motivates me, and that's why I was initially attracted to Peace Direct, because I could see that they were trying to do something different. I've just come from, as Aaron already mentioned, 3 years at BOND. So in that role, because we were a large international development network, we did a lot of work trying to bring people together and come up with joint positions on things and influence government strategies. So that's probably what I'll be speaking to, that experience a little bit in the presentation on the strategy, on the development strategy, because we've seen quite a lot of change over the past few years. So it's been really interesting to track that. And I know some of you will be familiar with that already, but that's me essentially.
Thanks, Kit. I always love hearing what got people into this work and why you're excited to do it. And your smile tells the whole story on that one. Let's go to the first of our pre-arranged questions before we open up the floor. So for those of you that aren't near the keyboard and would rather text in a question from your phone, you can do that on 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178. We'll drop that in the chat box as well. There it is, as well. But we're going to go to the pre-prepared questions first. The first one of those, I believe, is coming from Linlithgow. Do we have Linlithgow on the line?
Hi there, Aaron. This is Bentley from Linlithgow. Hi, Kit. What is the international development strategy, and what difference does it make?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I don't know how many of you will have skimmed the document or had a look at it, but essentially the International Development Strategy is a document produced by the government which supposedly sets its direction for how it's going to spend its international development assistance or the official development assistance budget over the coming years. I think these kinds of documents are really important because they give a sense of direction. They show what the government is thinking, and they put down some of the principles and policies that they're going to follow over the coming years on how the ODA budget will be spent. This one was especially important, I think, because we've seen over the past few years a complete gap in policy direction and haven't had a real sense of where things are going. Or where we have, it's been more behind the scenes, and it's been really hard to get a sense of it because it's not been written down or public. The last strategy that was published was in 2015. And then in 2020, we saw this merger of the International Development Department and the Foreign Office into what's now FCDO, Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. And at that time, all the strategies that existed became de facto redundant. Like we had policies on gender equality, policies on leaving no one behind, on health and the direction things would go. So for the last 2 years since then, there's been no clarity on what the direction of government aid spending will be. And that's really made influencing difficult. It's been difficult to talk to officials because they don't even know what's going on when these documents don't exist. So now we've got this thing published, this new strategy. There's a lot of issues with it, which we'll get into, I'm sure, in a bit. But what it does is give us something to refer to. So when we're trying to do advocacy work, when we're trying to do campaigning, we know at least what the starting point is so that we can refer to it. Otherwise, we've just got no sense of clarity. I think the other important thing that it does is it also gives us a sense of some things are new, some things we're seeing that are relatively new, but there's a lot of stuff that's not surprising. We've seen the trend, we see how things are going with aid cuts, with the increased focus on investment in the private sector and all those kinds of things. So actually seeing it written down, it's not good, it's not positive, but at least it shows us there's something that we're not imagining it, that this is the real direction of how aid is being spent. So there's at least something we can react to, I guess. So that kind of thing is quite important. And for those who haven't had a chance to skim it, there are 4 priorities in this new document, which I'll just go through quickly. The one is on investment, which is a big focus on private sector investment and the economy. The second is women and girls, which is one of the priorities from the previous strategy that at least is still there. That's something positives, women and girls' rights and equality. Humanitarian is the third one, humanitarian funding and efforts. And then there's a fourth one, which there was some rumor that this might be dropped, so it's good to see it actually written in the document, is on the global challenges, climate change, nature and health. So that's at least reflected in the document, maybe not in a very coherent way, but at least it's there written down. So that's the fourth one.
Thanks, Kit. Sure.
And thanks from me too. Great 30,000 foot introduction to a big topic. We're going to go over to Stort Valley for the second question.
Unmute. Okay, hi. We already know that the government has reduced its spending on international development. So what is new that we should be concerned about?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jill. I mean, there's quite a few things. I guess I'm coming at it more from Peace Direct's perspective. I know there's quite a lot of things to pick that I probably won't mention just because that's not our specific focus. But I think the one that's, well, there's a general issue, which is that it's quite vague. Even though it's got these priorities, it doesn't really give a sense of the overall direction of travel, or it doesn't give a real coherent vision for how development will be done. And that's combined with just the reduced focus on ODA in general. So the previous strategy at least had a lot of references to ODA, poverty reduction, on how that would be directed. And in the current document, it's really relegated to the end of the document. So it's not even given, that much priority. So that's one big issue with it, is just how unclear a lot of the document is. And then there's a few more specific things. So the first one that's been given a bit more, I suppose it's got a lot of attention, is the focus on investment. There was quite a lot of mention on investment in the previous strategy, but it was trying to do two things. It was trying to say, yes, we're investing, and yes, that could potentially be for the UK's benefit, but we're also going to invest in health, we're going to invest in poverty reduction, because that's good for the UK's reputation internationally. It's good for our moral leadership, those kinds of more moral arguments it was making, whereas the current document has put that to one side a bit, and it's much more focused on the economic benefits that could come to the UK. It's saying, that there's going to be a focus on aid for trade. It's not mentioned in those words, but that's essentially what the direction of travel. And there's a lot of focus on, the City of London, on how private sector investment could be mobilised. And that's one element that's not entirely new, but it's just stronger in this document, and it's a lot more of the primary focus. And one of the analysis of this said that, or did an analysis of how many times investment was mentioned, which is about 50, versus poverty or sustainability or anything like that. It's very few references to that. So that's one concern. The second is, well, we looked at this from a peace building lens. So we wanted to see how peace and conflict was addressed in the document. I think one thing that's new is just the near absence of references to peace, which we should be concerned about. I think conflict prevention has received very little attention, which is something that really worries us. And that compares to the 2015 strategy, which said that 50% of aid or the ODA budget would be spent in fragile and conflict affected states. And now that commitment is completely gone. So we've seen just a movement away from conflict considered as a local issue or a national issue, to conflict viewed as a global international challenge, which in some ways is good. I mean, you do want to recognise the international dimensions to conflict, but it shouldn't be either or, it should be combined. And unfortunately, that means that there's a focus just entirely on how conflict could affect the UK, or how the UK could get involved in terms of, brokering political agreements and things, but not how it affects communities. And that's a really important issue. And the last thing I want to mention, I think, is just around the framing of it. So I mentioned at the beginning that we've done some work on trying to decolonize the international development system, or rethink how development is done. And a lot of that is to do with how we see expertise and where we centre the knowledge that's created in the UK versus the knowledge that comes from the local level and the work being done at the local level. But we see a huge focus in this document on British expertise, on what British institutions can bring and how they can lead the development effort, which I think there's a problem with, there's an issue when you go beyond just saying there's certain forms of experience in the UK that can contribute and add to local efforts, versus saying the UK knows what works. And that's a quote from the document, we know what works and we can apply these strategies that have worked for us. So that just really comes out really strongly as the idea that the UK is a global leader, that there's a focus on British expertise. There's this idea that they're going to set up centres of expertise on how to pursue growth around the world, which sounds like a neutral offer, like we're just going to build best practice and show you how growth is done. But that's combined with the issue I mentioned earlier, which is to focus on UK economic benefits. So it doesn't really seem like the UK is a neutral actor if it's combining its own economic priorities with how aid is going to be spent, and viewing itself as some kind of neutral expert. It doesn't really add up. So those are the kind of the principal issues I see. I know there's quite a lot more relating to health, probably that results would have a lot more experience and expertise on, but those are the concerns that Peace Directors identified anyway.
Thanks, Kit. I think that all of that is absolutely spot on, and I think in any reading of that document, I think needs to be accompanied with a big serving of skepticism. And if you do have a chance to read the whole thing, you will almost immediately see everything that the Kit has mentioned staring you in the face. It's a very challenging document to engage with when you've got agendas like the people on this call do. So let's jump over to Manchester for the third question.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Lovely, hi. So the question from Manchester is, what do you think the government's focus should be, and what is missing from the document?
Thank you for that, Rachel. I think there's quite a lot missing. I think there's a lot of issues that different NGOs and different civil society groups have raised that are glaring gaps in the document, and things that even the UK government has committed to quite recently that aren't even mentioned, which is one of the more confusing parts of it. I guess from Peace Direct's perspective, in line with our report, I should put it in chat really, the kind of Time to Decolonise Aid report. If it's not there already, I'll do that after I finish speaking. It has a number of recommendations for the international development sector. So that some of these will sound quite unrealistic when you're considering the current government we have and the interest that they have in really addressing power inequality and those kinds of questions. But what we would like to see addressed a bit more in the document would be specific reconsideration of expertise, and that relates to the issue that I was just considering. Like, how does UK expertise, or the claims to UK expertise diminish local knowledge and capacities? And we would have liked to have seen much more emphasis on the existing knowledge that there is at the local level that communities have that could be brought out and invested in and supported. We'd like to have seen more direct consideration of the funding gap at the local level, which is a huge issue, that a lot of funding goes through international institutions and not through local community organisations and civil society groups that are perfectly able to, to manage these funds, or need a bit of extra support to manage them. But there is a route to that, and it's just not addressed in the document at all. Investing in local partnerships, developing deep partnerships with organisations outside of the UK, and just courageous funding at the local level. That's one thing that we think is really important. Just having partnerships based on mutual respect and mutual learning. I think these are things that come out of our findings. It's something that in the global south, in lower and middle income countries, they think is really important, that there isn't this investment in genuine open partnerships, and it's quite transactional and quite delivery focused. Whereas we have an opportunity for the UK government, and also INGOs that we work for, not all of us on the call, but I know, but I work for, to have these deep considerations and conversations with our partners and the officials delivering development programs, and rethinking how they're done. So that's absent. I think there's an absence of mention to civil society in general, local civil society, that we think is really important and should be added. I did identify a few areas where there is some interesting language in the document, which is there but not really elaborated on or given any kind of depth. So there is a reference on its own merit, sounds quite good. So there's a quote here, just I'll read quickly, that those who benefit from our work must have a voice in what we do and how we do it. The difficult reforms and good policies that drive progress should be locally owned, and our support will strengthen their sovereignty. So there's a nice little paragraph there, but it's not backed up by anything else in the document. And there are some opportunities. So there's a reference in the document as well to increase responsiveness and flexibility, but that refers to helping INGOs be more flexible, international NGOs be more flexible in getting funding, and to ambassadors, UK ambassadors, so they can be more flexible in how they deliver programs. Whereas that could be just extended to say we also want to support local civil society in different countries to be more flexible and adaptive, and to work with them in a way that's more supportive. Similar with the multilateral commitment, I completely recognise what's being said at the beginning about the reduced focus on multilaterals being a real problem because of how it will affect health funding, effectively with the Global Fund. But you could see a world in which there's a commitment to more bilateral funding, because recognising the gaps that some multilateral institutions can't really deliver, like targeted funding at the local level, that's something that the UN and others don't do particularly well. So you could see increased funding at the bilateral level by UK government directly to support local civil society, but they've said that they're going to do that, but to fund UK priorities. So again, it would be nice to see a bit more emphasis on not just UK priorities, but what are the priorities at the community level. So that's another thing it would be nice to see a little bit more of. I mean, I think those kind of the main things. I mean, just more funding directed locally. I've kind of referenced it already, but I think that's really important and completely absent. And there are previous DFID, International Development Department documents that refer to this issue of local civil society not getting enough funding. And we've seen from the US recently a commitment from US aid to spend 25% of their funding over the next 4 years at the local level, which is a really positive commitment. There's a question about how they're going to do that and how that's going to work exactly. But it would be nice to have seen something like that in the UK government document as well, which is also completely absent. So there are some ways forward, and there are things that could be committed to, but that's just not what we've seen from this current strategy, sadly.
Thanks, Kit. And I think you're absolutely right about the multilateral bilateral piece. I think if the bilateral money is spent well on some of the things that you've been talking about, it can be hugely impactful. On the health side, I will make a quick comment. I mean, one of the reasons we do keep on banging on about the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria is that unlike many other organizations in the UN system, there is actually a meaningful governance of communities, people affected by the three diseases, developing country representatives, civil society on the board of that organization, and in a lot of its operational structures in ways that don't exist elsewhere throughout the multilateral system. So while it's no replacement for funding the kind of organizations and partners that Kit and Peace Direct work with, it's kind of the next best thing within the system that we have, and it's one of the reasons we're very proud and why we elevate it. If you're going to spend the money in that way at that scale, that's the best of the bunch, we believe. That's the end of all the prepackaged questions, and I think it's time for us to throw open the floor. There's actually a question already there in the chat. We've answered the one, I hope, on who's actually written the thing in terms of civil servants holding the pen, but ultimately they do so at the direction of the Foreign Secretary, and she is the one that says what goes in, what stays out, and signs off the thing at the end of the day. So it's hers, very much so. But there is a question there from Jill. I don't know if you want to read that out, Jill, and while Jill reads that out, if anybody else has a question, do go ahead and type one in or text one in.
You said that you made a comment, or somebody made a comment about the civil service numbers, the people being cut down, which is really worrying, because we're losing expertise where it really matters. You know, if it's dependent on another job, next turn round, and it's also something that we've talked to our MP about. Because we said that if FCO and DFID were merged, then it would create a brain drain of good people that would go elsewhere. And that was kind of news to her, and she was a bit shocked by it. I'm just looking at some leverage. I mean, I'm just really bothered about the way the government is treating civil service. More about this cutting down, where's the cuts going to be and of what scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important issue. And I think originally when the merger happened, it was sold as a merger, as a kind of meeting of two departments to bring out the best in both, which was not really the agenda. It was more of a takeover. So we've seen a disproportionate loss of directors that used to work for DFID versus ones that work in FCDO. It worked in the Foreign Office and now work at FCDO. But I think it's just really clear from this current strategy that it's not written by officials who really care about or understand development, or at least that's not the direction that's coming from above. So it's hard to know the exact numbers, but I think just anecdotally, there's been a huge loss of different personnel, or the ones that still exist have been sidelined and aren't really sure what their role is at the moment. And I think there's been a further announcement that there's going to be, is it 30% cuts across the board or something like that, something very, very high. Who knows whether that will proceed and will fall on FCDO, because they've already had quite a lot of loss of personnel. But it's a big issue, the kind of brain drain issue within the civil service, and particularly for people who have worked in the development sector and do care about it and understand it. I think that's just missing. So there's no positive response to that, unfortunately, but it's just a huge concern. That I think that's one thing that you can really see from the document, that it's not really got a huge development input or background to it.
Thanks, Kit. Yeah, no, that was I think you're referring to the 90,000 job cuts I mentioned at the start of the call, Jill. That's a vast number of civil servants, and whether it falls disproportionately on FCDO or not, there will have to be more for that number. There will have to be more. And, I would say, right now, the civil servants currently in FCDO that were formerly of DFID, they need our love. They need our support. They really do. They're fighting the good fight. Many of them are probably the most demoralized they've ever been in their careers, would be my guess. I have heard just quietly that some of the language that Kit read out earlier that he liked was stuff that was sort of snuck in at the last minute by civil servants that were just like not willing to give up and really, really wanted to make sure that some of the priorities that they cared so passionately about got into the document at the end as part of the final hour. So, I think we should definitely not treat the FCDO as a monumental entity, which is collectively doing some things that we disagree with. There are a lot of extremely good people working very hard in the building still. They are getting fewer in number, and that is a big concern for all of our work. I don't see any other question. Oh, Harriet, there we go. Perfect timing. Do you want to say your question?
Yeah, okay. I just really wondered whether any other nations, you mentioned, I think the US, whether any other nations are doing really well on this whole decolonisation and coming up with some new and enlightened development strategies in this current climate where, you know, things have changed and the way we're looking at development is changing. So is anyone doing really well?
Yes, there are some that are doing far better than others. I think, yeah, you mentioned the US already. I think there's a lot that could be improved in the way that the US government does things as well. So I don't want to romanticize them or anything, but they have at least made this funding commitment, which I think is really important. And it's led to some really interesting internal conversations. You know, they're willing to speak with NGOs who are speaking on these issues, or, you know, try and partner directly with local organizations and civil society. So I think that's at least a really good starting point. And then probably the Scandinavian donors, I guess, so the Swedish in particular, are doing a good job on having these conversations and trying to rethink how they do partnerships as well, in terms of directly funding at the local level and funding national organizations. I think just there was a good analysis. I need to find it actually. I think maybe it's not published yet, but there's an analysis going around about which donors have specific policies in place that mean that they can't fund locally or fund national organizations. So there are some that have slightly more enlightened policies, and I think it's mostly in Northern Europe and the US that are trying to reform this a little bit. So those would probably be the examples that I'd mention.
If I can jump in with one really quickly, again, it's the US government. The US government provides funding to an organization called the Stop TB Partnership, which I was on the board of for a while. And one of the things that they've done over the last 2 years is that they've dramatically increased the amount of funding that they've made available for this thing called the Civil Society Challenge Facility, which I'll put a link to in the chat in just a second. And this is basically where they're funding community-led and civil society organizations working on tuberculosis at the local level, helping build their capacity. And by capacity, I mean paying people salaries, right? Because there's already very smart people doing very good work. So building their capacity through just making sure that they can pay their bills. And that's led to those organizations being able to increasingly professionalize, increasingly grow, deliver more services, bring more of their local knowledge to the biggest table, and bring some of that local knowledge through into some of the structures in the Global Fund, for example, for AIDS, TB, and malaria. So, you know, drawing that link right up through. So yeah, there are definitely some good examples of where you know, that shift towards local capacity building is happening on the ground. So it doesn't need to be rocket science. It's something we can be delivering right now. Do we have any more questions? Does somebody maybe want to come off mute and yell one? Because I haven't had any come in on the no, I definitely haven't had any come in via text message.
Maybe, I mean, if there are no more questions, I guess, is it okay if I just finished off with one point about how we respond to this? Because I think it's really an interesting question, but the one is really relevant for us, and there isn't a clear way forward, but it's be interesting to see what next steps are.
Yeah. Oh, you may have. Keris has also popped another question in the chat too. Keris, do you want to ask that out loud?
Yeah, I can do. Sorry, my mic might be a bit rubbish because it's not my proper one. But yeah, when it comes to these more like kind of theoretical questions around where we're, or not theoretical, but less like concrete, we're not asking for specific money, we're not asking for specific targets, we're asking for quite like theoretical, kind of more murky areas of saying, can we go into civil society and work with these partnerships? How do we campaign for that and still kind of try to say our message and get something specific out of the government?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's definitely not something. I'd say that is true. Analysis that we don't really have a specific set of asks that we've all agreed on yet, I think is definitely valid. I think there are some specific things that people have been calling for around targets for funding at the local level, which I think, what we've seen that in the US, and it is something that we could be asking for more in the UK. It won't solve all the issues, but I think it's a starting point if there's just a recognition that there are local partners who can deliver development, and it doesn't all need to be done through the international system or through international NGOs. I think that could be something developed into something concrete. And I think, the answers won't necessarily come from me. I think there are already coalitions out there who don't necessarily work in the UK, who are making specific requests of donors, are asking for more flexibility, are asking for more, less intense reporting requirements, are asking for, partnership models to be more open and adaptive and able to change with circumstance and what the local groups are asking for. So I might not be able to list them now, but they are out there. So I think that's one thing that I would want to maybe summarize with is that, and I know I've been quite negative on this call because we've been talking about this government strategy, but we don't need to, I think, accept this government strategy. That was something I was trying to get across in the blog Erin kind of mentioned, is that we don't need to accept this as the limits of our horizon going forward. I think there is a tendency sometimes to see this as, this is the document, so we can ask for maybe small changes in either direction, but essentially this is what we have to work with. I don't think that the UK government is up to date and up to speed with what's being asked for and those specific recommendations being made by people working in lower middle income countries or global coalitions of civil society. So, if they're not being responsive, if they're not putting forward documents that have our asks in them and have really progressive and good commitments in them, then there is organising we can do outside of that. I think to a certain extent we're going to have to work with the UK government, of course, because they still have a large international development budget and we still want to see that used in a positive way. But there are other conversations happening, so I think it's maybe just not looking for much positive change from the UK government, at least in the near future, and then we'll see what happens in a couple of years. But there is still a lot we can be doing outside of that. So there are other governments who are trying to change. There are other donors that are taking positive steps in the right direction. So I think that's maybe the positive note, the cautious positive note I'd like to end on.
Thanks, Kit. And just a reminder for those that read the action materials a while ago, just a refresher. The action for this month is to write to the Foreign Secretary expressing concerns about the international development strategy and urging her to ensure that all ODA spending is focused on poverty reduction. Now, you can rest assured that everything that we've talked about tonight and all of the things that you've campaigned on behalf of Results over the last few years, months, that you've been involved, are all things that are really important and powerful ways of ensuring that our ODA is being spent on poverty reduction. So you can feel free to pick your favorite thing. Maybe it's something you heard about for the first time tonight, or maybe it's something you've campaigned for a long time in the past. And you can grab some old action materials. There's plenty of evidence in there about how that is an example of really powerful and effective ODA spending. And you should be able to see whether it is or isn't in the strategy. You should be able to see how much focus there is in the strategy on things that aren't the stuff that we care about. And so, making sure that the Foreign Secretary knows that there are people willing to engage in the substance of what she's written, unwilling to be swayed by the fluff, unwilling to watch her do the things that she's doing to try and take our attention away from what's most important and to focus her back on the thing that really matters, which is, well, number one, the legally mandated need to return to 0.7, but maybe that's slightly aside, but also the legally mandated need for all of our ODA to be spent on poverty alleviation. That there is an act for that, to coin a phrase. And so it's please remind her that what she does is important, and she needs to be doing more of that. So yeah. If there are no final questions for Kit.
Could I just ask one last question?
Please go ahead, William.
Is there any sort of scrutiny of the investors? We have had examples of cronyism, and will they be under scrutiny in the forthcoming running of the ODA?
Kit, do you want to tackle that one?
It's a really good question. I mean, I know that there are really experienced people out there who know a lot about the rules of ODA. So I guess there are probably limits on certain forms of investment that couldn't be officially counted as the development budget, as the official development budget. However, I think the document goes beyond ODA and talks a lot about forms of investment that aren't going to officially count as the budget. So the issue would be, is investment going to be spent which isn't, really isn't really protected in the ways that you're talking about, in terms of where it comes from, how it's being invested, whether it's being invested in fossil fuels, for example, or whether there's other kinds of corruption that lie behind it, or where profits are being sent, or any of those kinds of questions. So it might not actually be much protection around so even if within the ODA budget there is some level of protection, it's how the ODA budget is being used to mobilize other forms of investment that come with it, and how the justification of development is being used as a way to flood this kind of dirty money into new contexts, I think, and to underwrite investment. So there'll be possibly more examples like the Pergo Dam in future. I think it kind of opens up, unfortunately, the opportunity for more kinds of situations like that. That's kind of maybe a doomsday scenario, but it's certainly makes it way more likely than it was. So probably not that much protection, except for some of the measures that are already in place surrounding ODA. But I don't know, Aaron, if you've got more background on that.
I mean, I think you've given an excellent answer. I mean, the real answer is nobody really knows because it's all a bit vague. But we have a fairly strong suspicion that the scrutiny on a lot of that ODA expenditure will not be at historic levels. We've already seen an erosion of transparency in the move from DFID to FCDO. For those of us that use the DFID dev tracker to track where our aid spending goes, we've seen a noticeable decline in the quality of data available on that website, even in just the last year. And you can bet your bottom dollar that a lot of the big lending and other instruments and the money that goes out the door that way is not going to be reported remotely as transparently as most of our current ODA spenders even now. So it's a very real concern, William. Another reason why this month's action is important, and another reason why we want her to focus on things that we know deliver high quality poverty reduction outcomes.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. We are spectacularly right on time, so I'm going to do my wrap up. So first of all, thank you so much, Kit, for answering all of these questions and for giving us an idea about some of the possible implications for the government's new international development strategy. Your bet is as good as mine as to how long we'll have the current Foreign Secretary in post and how much of that agenda she gets to actually enact. But the strategy is out there, and that's what the department's working to, no matter who's in charge. So it will be very, very interesting. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. So in our action materials emailed to everyone last week, the link to the strategy is there. If you haven't had the time to read it, please do have a read. Let's see. What do I need to do? I really hope that you feel inspired to take this month's action. We've talked about what that is, writing to Liz Truss. It is really important that we look to influence her, that she knows that people are watching her closely. She won't get a lot of letters on this from people like you with the intelligence and insight that you can bring to bear. So please do that. That will be noticed. Even though she's very busy, they will be paying attention to that stuff. Kit, one final thank you to you.
Thank you very much. It's been really great. I just wrote in the chat that it's been great being part of this discussion, and thank you for inviting me.
A pleasure. Looking forward to continued partnership. It's been great. Everybody, thank you all for your efforts. As always, please do share how you get on with us. Goodbye for now. I look forward to seeing you again on the next Grassroots conference call. It's going to be on Tuesday, the 12th of July. We're putting it back a week from normal. That's because of the national conference on the 2nd and 3rd of July, because the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th all in a row would probably be a bit too much for everybody. So we put it back a week. I hope to see many of you there, either in person, as we were holding it for the first time in 3 years, or virtually if you can't make it. We'll make that work. If you haven't yet booked your place, it is not too late. That's all for now. Enjoy the rest of your evenings and have fun. Bye, folks.
Thank you.